Turn it the other way. Could you turn the laptop the other way? The other way. Here, never mind. It's not good. All right, sorry about that. So we asked all the women not to use any birth control pills. If they were sexually active, do something else. And one of the women said, don't worry about me, I'm infertile, I don't ovulate, whatever. The second month of the vegan diet, she came into the research center and said, Dr. Barnard, I've got some bad news and some good news. The bad news is I'm leaving your study. The good news is I am pregnant. And she thought she was infertile. What she was out of balance. She gave birth to a healthy baby and another one and a third one. So I want to talk about getting back into balance. This new thing that I want to focus on is hormones. It's a word you hear about, but people don't really know what it means. What it means is all of the plans that control everything that goes on in your body, and to look forward to the message here is you can control it based on what you have for breakfast and for lunch and for dinner and snacks. And if you don't know how to control your hormones, you're driving blind. Okay, so what are hormones? Hormones really are like letters. A hormone is made in one part of your body, and then it goes all the way through your bloodstream to another part of your body where it gives messages on how to control your health. So you can have too few letters, so you don't get the hormones that you need, or you can have too many. Now, think about it this way. Your ovaries, a woman's ovaries make estrogen that goes to her uterus to control her reproductive function. In a man, his testes make testosterone that go to his brain and make him want to run for president. So you get the idea. These are what hormones do. So at the beginning of the month, a woman doesn't have very much estrogen in her blood. It's very low, but then it rises to a peak and then it falls about 2 weeks later. She's ovulating. Her ovaries are releasing an egg. And then in the third week, the amount of estrogen starts rising again, and that's because the uterus is the most optimistic organ in the body. Every single month, the uterus thinks, this could be the big one. We're going to get pregnant this month for sure. Well, then after so what it does is the rising estrogen thickens up the uterine lining in anticipation of a blessed event. But then after another week, the disappointed uterus discovers that we are not pregnant after all, and so the amount of estrogen falls, and the inner lining of the uterus is discarded in menstrual flow. And that's when pain happens. Here's the deal. That whole curve can go up and go down, and if it goes up, too much estrogen in a woman's blood means too much thickening of her uterus, means too much pain at the end of the month, which means my phone rings and she's calling saying, I can't get on a plane. Are you with me so far? Okay, I want to show you how this works. Okay, there's the uterus in the middle and the ovaries off to the side with the fallopian tubes reaching out to them. So in the middle of the uterus, that endometrial layer thickens up each month in anticipation of pregnancy. That's normal. But let's say I'm eating non-vegan foods, a lot of greasy junk. What can happen is that lining will expand too much and it leads to pain. So all I was suggesting to this young woman who called me up was some simple diet changes that would reduce her estrogen level. High fiber, low fat foods will get estrogen back into balance, okay? So how does that work? How could foods get something like estrogen into balance? Well, to illustrate that, let me share with you another story. This is Catherine. Catherine grew up in Louisiana. She was an Air Force aerospace engineer. And in fact, she was one of the first people to go into Iraq in 2003 because she built the military bases. And when you're in a war zone and you're working hard and you're eating what the government gives you, you do not gain a whole lot of weight. However, as eventually her tour of duty came to an end, and the U.S. shipped her back to Louisiana. And her friends said, Catherine, welcome home. What did you miss when you were over in the war? She said, you know what I missed? I missed cheese. Cheese, macaroni and cheese snacks, all that kind of stuff. And so her friends took her out to all kinds of restaurants and she cheesed it up. And one of her best friends said, I've got a surprise for you. She gave her a whole case of 48 boxes of macaroni and cheese dinners. which Catherine ate for 48 days straight. That's right. And she gained weight, but she also started to develop some symptoms. She started to have pain in her abdomen. Her abdomen started to hurt, and it got worse and worse, especially with her cycle, but it never really went away. And eventually her doctor said, we need to do an examination. Her doctor did a laparoscopy. That's where you make a little incision below the abdomen. You look inside with a scope. The doctor then sewed her up afterwards and said, we got our diagnosis. It's called endometriosis. Endometriosis is a condition where cells that are supposed to be inside your uterus have escaped. They come up the fallopian tubes, we believe, and implanted all around the abdomen. They can stick to your intestinal tract. They can stick to the ovaries. They can attach to the fallopian tubes and strangle them so that you have not only terrible pain, but because they affect your internal organs, including the fallopian tubes, they can leave you infertile. This was her situation. So the doctor gave her pain medicines and hormonal treatments, but it didn't help. The pain was continuing day after day after day, and so finally the doctor said, well, there's one last thing we can do. We can just go in and just take out your uterus. Hysterectomy. She said, well, my husband and I are newlyweds. We haven't raised our family yet, and we'd kind of like to do that. And the doctor said, well, you've got nothing to lose. You're infertile anyway from this disease. Go ahead and just have the procedure. So she went ahead and said, okay, we'll sign up for the hysterectomy, but they couldn't have it for about 6 weeks. So in the interim, a friend dragged her to a nutritionist and said, let's look at your diet. And the diet looked at how much cheese she was eating and the meat and so forth, and the nutritionist gave her the same diet that I had given the young woman who called me on the phone. No animal products, kept oils really, really low, and something started happening. She started to feel better. Her pain went down, her energy came up, her weight came down. She was feeling better day by day. But 6 weeks later, she dutifully showed up for the hysterectomy and said, I'm ready. And they anesthetized her. The doctor made an incision to put in the scope where they were going to suck her uterus out through laparoscopic surgery. But about an hour later, she woke up in the recovery room. And the doctor was shaking her shoulder saying, Catherine, I didn't do it. We didn't do the hysterectomy. I didn't feel good about it. Your endometriosis is effectively gone. I removed a little bit of the scarring that was there from the old disease, but there's nothing new there. This is some kind of miracle that's happened. And her mother's in the room with her saying, she went vegan. The doctor said, stop it. There's no way that foods could cause endometriosis, and there's no way a diet change could fix it. This has to be a miracle. So I think that's written in her chart somewhere that she had a miracle, but she lost a lot of weight. She no longer has endometriosis, but she still has her uterus, and she now has 3 kids. This is a woman who thought, I'm infertile, I thought I've got pain, I thought I'll never have children. What she was out of balance. Because nobody, not even her doctor, told her how estrogens, which drive the endometriosis, can be changed based on what you eat. Okay. So there she is. This is Catherine. Her name is Catherine Lawrence. She now works in Dallas, and she's one of our Food for Life instructors, which is just a great program. Okay. So, all right. So I mentioned cheese. Cheese. She loved cheese. Does cheese have hormones in it? Well, think about this. Cheese comes from milk. Milk comes from a cow. That's right. Every glass of milk you ever had comes from the following scenario. The underpaid farmhand goes up to the cow and puts a big glove on his left hand that goes all the way up to his shoulder. He then inserts his hand into the cow's rectum up to his elbow, and through the rectal wall he can feel the uterus. And he holds the uterus still with his left hand. With his right hand, he takes what looks like a knitting needle, and it is preloaded with bull semen. He jams it through her cervix, shoots in the semen, and she will become pregnant. Now, she's not going to fight because she cannot. She's chained by the neck and she can't turn around, she can't move. She's going to become pregnant whether she wants to be or not. Now, 9 months later, she will give birth to a calf. And the calf is going to be taken away, and if it's a male calf, he will be killed for veal. If she's a female, she will be raised in an isolation hutch because she can't have mom's milk. The dairy needs mom's milk, so she will be raised on a milk replacer until she's old enough to have a guy's left hand up her rectum, and then she will be artificially inseminated. And cows in nature live about 20 years. On a dairy farm, they live 4. Because after about 4 years, they just don't crank out quite as much milk as they did before, and it's cheaper to kill mom and impregnate her daughter. So what I'm saying is that for anybody here who has an ethical concern about the treatment of animals, the dairy industry is a meat industry. Every dairy cow that ever gave a glass of milk is killed for low-grade meat, but before she's killed, she will be impregnated several times and have her children taken away from her. She will cry all night long, as will they, and then they'll kill her. Cheerful stuff, isn't it? Here's the point. A pregnant cow makes estrogen. Estrogen gets in the blood plasma. And the longer the pregnancy goes along, the more estrogen there is. And then it gets into the milk. And there's much more in the milk than there was in the plasma. And then when you turn milk into cheese, the estrogen gets concentrated in the cheese. So the FDA has been asked by many dairies to say, we want to label our milk hormone-free, because they mean we don't inject bovine growth hormone. And the FDA always refuses. They say, you can't label milk hormone-free. It's got estrogen in it that came from the cow. It's got progesterone and other things that all came from this living factory, and it ends up in the milk, okay? So, does this affect your health? Researchers have looked at men in college, and college-age men don't necessarily have exemplary diets. And what you find is that if you check sperm counts on college-age men, those eating the most cheese have the lowest sperm counts. What we think is happening is the estrogen